racist, anti-Semitic and extremely problematic. Now, the leaked chats of the young Republican youth leaders have revealed these unfiltered and dark conversations that they have about their political opponents. The language of these messages can be disturbing to many. Now, according to chats that have been leaked and have been accessed by the American media outlet Politico, nothing apparently is out of bounds for these young leaders when they message themselves. Bullying, racism, fascism, anti-Semitism, and a strange kind of love for Adolf Hitler. The issues that have historically been considered extremely controversial and in many cases illegal are now finding their support base inside these American political chat groups. So let's take a look at some of these very, very problematic text messages that have been exchanged in these chats that have been accessed by Politico. Now, this exchange is part of a chat that took place amongst the young Republican activists on Telegram. The group has young Republican leaders from New York, Kansas, Arizona, and Vermont. Now, the prominent names in these chat groups include the likes of Bobby Walker, Peter Guenter, Joe Maligno, and Ann K. Cathy. All these Republicans are associated with the New York State Young Republicans organization. From I love Hitler to gassing political opponents and using racist slurs, nothing, it appears, is out of bounds. Now, these are only some excerpts of the 28,000 messages of a private chat that Politico has managed to access. In another chat, Peter Guenter has said to his fellow Republicans that he will put his political opponents in gas chambers and also create some of the greatest physiological torture methods that are known to man. Now, Joe Maligno has said that gas chambers don't fit Hitler's aesthetics. Now, Ann K. Cathy's take on the exchange was that she's ready to watch people burn. Now, Peter Guenter and Bobby Walker have issued an apology for the leaked chats, but the larger question still remains: what kind of action will the Republican Party take against its young leadership? Now, so far, the grand old party has been fairly silent on the scandal. So this is not for the first time that a scandal of this nature has affected the Republican Party. This is yet another instance of a chat that has been leaked, and this time it shows the kind of conversations these young Republican leaders have had amongst themselves. And to tell us more and also the implication this is likely to have, we are joined on this broadcast by Mr. Greg Swenson, the chairman of the Republicans Overseas UK, and he's joining us live on the broadcast from Washington, D.C. Mr. Swenson, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. Now, it's almost bizarre reading what's been said by these young Republican leaders with each other in these chat groups that have been accessed by Politico. In your assessment, what is the implication of this kind of language that has been used? How is it going to affect the image of the Republican Party?
I don't think it will have much. And I think the word that you used, which I think is quite accurate, is bizarre. And I think this is just a bizarre conversation by some relatively unknown people. I had not heard of any of their names prior to your introduction to the segment. So look, I think it's clear that the left and perhaps the progressive left media in the U.S. was looking for something to distract attention away from just the phenomenal week that President Trump is having. So here we have this historic agreement in the Middle East, and then all we hear about from the left-leaning media is some obscure private chat by a bunch of unknowns. So it also shows that this, yes, is it's impossible to eliminate fringe elements in any party. And I think we're seeing that today with, these kind of fringe conversations that are absurd in so many ways and bizarre, as you pointed out. But these are the fringe elements. This is just a bunch of oddball young Republicans having a grotesque chat, as opposed to, that's the fringe element. Whereas on the left, the Democrat Party, it's actually mainstream. Having violent conversations has been mainstreamed in the Democrat Party, and I think you see that even in labor in the United Kingdom. So I think this is just another moment where we're seeing a distraction here.
Interesting. You're saying that these are unknown faces, but a lot of the people who are commenting about this are saying that these are the young rising stars within the Republican ecosystem, and therefore to try and downplay it or brush it aside is not going to work. But just to add further to it, is there a problem with the Republican Party and its leadership that this is not the first time, this is the second time that a chat such as this been leaked? The last time round, it was a much more high-profile one where Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, he had no idea that he was adding people from a media organization in such a classified chat group. Is there a problem with how the Republican Party communicates with itself?
Yeah, look, that was completely apples and oranges. I'm glad you brought it up because the Signal chat was actual leadership. And thankfully, there was nothing unpleasant that was in those chats. And it was just demonstrating that there was robust disagreement and conversation and arguments to be made within the party. And that's healthy. That's good news. Whereas this whole chat group is just, again, it's just a fringe element. Yeah, I guess you could argue, or I'm seeing on social media, that these were the up-and-comers. I don't think they have any future in the Republican Party, obviously, after that chat. So, no, this is not some endemic situation with the Republicans. Yes, we're very transparent. This administration is probably the most transparent. The Signal chat, of course, was not supposed to be transparent, but it turns out that it was refreshing, actually, to see the conversation they were having. The mistake that was made was including the reporter in that by mistake. So, look, I'm not worried about this incident. I would be much more worried in the Democrat Party, where you have Jay Jones, the Attorney General candidate in Virginia, that's saying the same kind of things that we saw in these very unpleasant chats overnight. So, but he is a leader in the party. He is an actual mainstream Democrat leader. We're seeing that in many occasions from different Democrat leaders.
All right. Very interesting argument there, where you're suggesting that attention also needs to be focused on some of the Democrat leaders, but it remains to be seen as to what action is taken on these young, upcoming Republican voices within the Republican Party. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Svensson, for joining us and giving us that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's now shift our attention to the other big story, where in the United States, there is a new storm that is brewing inside the Department of War, as it is now called. After establishing a set of rules and policies for the military, there is now a new protocol, a whole new protocol for media in the United States of America when they want to interact with the Pentagon. The Pentagon wants the journalists to sign a media policy, but not everyone wishes to comply. Now, the American President Donald Trump has backed the move. He's floated by the Defense Secretary, or the War Secretary, as he should now be more appropriately called, Pete Hegseth, calling the press to be dishonest.
I think I can speak for him. I'll let him speak for himself, but I think he finds the press to be very disruptive in terms of world peace and maybe security for our nation. Press is very dishonest. Not you, but the press is very dishonest.
Now, Trump's comments have come a day after Pete Hegseth shared a post on social media platform X on the new protocol for media access. Now, in the post, Pete Hegseth has written that access to the Pentagon is a privilege and not a right, followed by a list of new rules that media persons are now required to adhere to. The new policy bars journalists access to many areas of the Pentagon and also prohibits them from seeking information by talking to officials in the department. Journalists will now have access only to the information that is approved by Pete Hegseth for a press release.
The Pentagon press corps, of all press corps, would be front and center across the board on wanting to give credit to the president for forging this kind of peace, and instead what they want to talk about is a policy about them.
Now, at least about 20 news organizations have declined to sign Pentagon's new policy, which dictates some fresh terms for what the journalists can access. The New York Times, the Associated Press, Reuters, the Washington Post, the Atlantic and Newsmax are some of the big names that have rejected the new rules. Now, critics say that this goes against press freedom and is a move to control the media and the narrative. And several news outlets have said that the Department of War's policy infringes on the media's First Amendment, that is right to gather news.
The Trump administration is trying everything they can to control the media, but they won't be able to do that. They just won't. Unless our Supreme Court continues its trend of disregarding the facts and giving Trump everything he wants. But right now, the law is very clear that the government can't stop the presses just because they don't like what's being written.
In response, the Defense Secretary's team has said that journalists who do not sign and adhere to the new policy will have to hand over their Pentagon admission badges and should clear out their workplaces. All right, now joining us on the broadcast with more details on this, we have my colleague Susan Tehrani, who's joining us live from New York. Susan, this is a controversial sort of a media policy that the Pentagon has issued. Help us make sense. Why is the Pentagon concerned about journalists trying to access the corridors of the Pentagon and information that comes out from them?
Yeah, this is a bizarre comment on the part of Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, because journalists have been at the Pentagon and the Defense Department for many years and decades. And there is a vault. Everyone knows that you don't access that. It's almost like asking the White House press corps not to go storm into the Oval Office and try to get information from the president. No one does that. We have to call it for what it is. Basically, what they want to do ultimately is take information and spoon feed it to the media. And they're saying that if the Defense Department, the War Department doesn't give a go-ahead on the stories that media outlets want to publish, then they're not going to be able to publish it. This means not soliciting information from any member of the military, which is something that journalists do. They get backgrounders, they get quotes, they get information from individuals. It also means that even unclassified information, if it's not okayed by the Defense Department, the Department of War, then that can't be released as well. This is tying the hands of journalists, and that's why we're seeing that almost no media organization here in the United States has agreed to do such a thing. There is one far-right outlet called One America News. They have agreed to do it, but they're very fringe. They're not mainstream. And, I just want to say, Mohammed, getting information out to the public is one thing, but there are a lot of military personnel and family of military members who rely on reports that are coming out from the Pentagon, from the Defense Department, the Department of War, that is very critical to them. It's important to them. And so we may see a sort of course correction moving forward, but it's very surprising coming from someone like Pete Hegseth, who was a former journalist. Interesting.
Thank you very much indeed, Susan Tehrani, for joining us with all those updates there. All right, so the Gaza peace deal has now entered into its second and a much more difficult phase now. The State of Israel and the United States are turning up the heat on Hamas. They're asking the Palestinian group to release the dead bodies of the hostages. Now, Hamas has said that it is working to find the remains of any of the dead hostages that at this moment remain buried under the rubble that's been brought about because of the Israeli bombings. Now, the American President Donald Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu have issued a warning to Hamas. They say that Hamas must disarm or they will face the violent consequences.
On Gaza, how long will it take Hamas to disarm, and can you guarantee that is going to happen?
Well, they're going to disarm, and because they said they were going to disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them.
Now, in an interview with an American-based broadcaster CBS, the Israeli Prime Minister echoed Donald Trump's words. He said that all hell will break loose if Hamas refuses to disarm. Now, the Palestinian group has already refused to accept disarmament. The group spokesperson, Hazem Qasim, has said that they will not be captives to Israeli terms or demands. The Qasim has reaffirmed Hamas's long-standing position that the group will maintain its arms and governance over the Gaza Strip until there is a pathway for Palestinian statehood that is outlined. Now, Donald Trump's 20-point peace plan clearly mentions disarmament of Hamas, but no role of the group in the future governance of the Gaza Strip. It has also proposed a so-called Board of Peace that will rule Gaza in the interim. But it stays completely silent on the question of Palestinian statehood. Now, the Israeli forces have currently stepped back to a predetermined yellow line, but they still maintain control over nearly 52% of the Gaza Strip. The Hamas fighters are taking control of the areas that the Israeli forces have retreated from. Now, Donald Trump has said that the phase 2 of the Gaza deal has already begun, but the deadlock on the question of disarmament can put the already fragile deal in a complete bit of a limbo, opening the way for the renewed Israeli offensive on the Gaza Strip. In Madagascar, military rule is now a reality following weeks of deadly Gen Z protests that saw the ouster of President Andry Rajoelina. A sense of calm has prevailed in the capital, Antananarivo, as the residents return to their daily routine. The young people gathered at the famous May 13th square calling for constitutional reform, greater transparency and also improved living conditions. Now, in the north of Madagascar, the protesters were seen dancing and then singing in the streets celebrating Rajoelina's impeachment.
It feels like we've just been released from prison. We know very well all the harm he has done. I'm truly relieved that Andry Rajoelina is no longer in power.
Now, the Russian Foreign Ministry has said that Moscow is monitoring the events in Madagascar pretty closely. On Tuesday, a Malagasy military officer and coup leader announced that state power in Madagascar was taken over by a military council comprising of members of the army and the national police. In an interview with his barracks, he has reportedly claimed that he is now taking the position of president.
I'm here to read a statement that says we will take power starting today and dissolve, starting today, the Senate, the HCC, High Constitutional Court, the HCJ, High Court of Justice, the HCDDED, High Council for the Defense of Democracy and the Rule of Law, and the CINI, Independent National Electoral Commission. There you go.
Rajoelina, who himself came to power in a coup in 2009, has condemned the power grab by the military in a statement. The 51-year-old leader in hiding has sought to dissolve the lower house by a decree. But the lawmakers have voted to impeach him, leaving the country in a bit of a deadlock, which the military seized upon to declare that they were taking charge. The anti-government protests have broken out in Madagascar since late September over widespread power outages and water shortage. However, they soon turned violent, killing at least about 22. Reportedly, the youth-led protests have continued till even hours before President's impeachment and the military's takeover of the island nation. In India, the state of Bihar heads for elections in less than a month. And across political parties, a relentless campaign season is underway. The ruling alliance of the NDA is finalizing its candidates, while the opposition India alliance is yet to finalize its seat-sharing agreement. Now, things are moving pretty fast in the ruling alliance. The leading NDA partners are announcing candidates for the upcoming polls. The Bharatiya Janata Party so far has announced 83 candidates in 2 separate lists. And on the other hand, the Chief Minister Nitish Kumar's JDU party has also announced a list of about 57 candidates. The LJP, led by Chirag Paswan, has announced a list of 14 candidates, and this takes the tally of the total NDA candidates to 154. The BJP has fielded 25-year-old singer Maithili Thakur from the Alinagar seat in Mithilanchal. She hails from the same region and has previously expressed her wish to contest from elections there. Now, Maithili Thakur joined the Bharatiya Janata Party on Tuesday. And according to the seat-sharing agreement in the NDA alliance, the BJP and the JDU will be fielding candidates in 101 seats each. The third big alliance partner, the Lok Janashakti Party, will get to field 29 contenders, while other smaller partners like the RLM and the HAM will get to contest on 6 seats each. On the contrary, things are moving fairly slowly in the opposition India bloc. The RJD and the Congress-led alliance is yet to agree on seat distribution. The deadline to field candidates for the first list is looming, and the RJD chief Tejasvi Yadav has filed his nomination from Raghopur Assembly seat. The party is also facing criticism over fielding gangster Mohammad Shahabuddin's son in Bihar polls. After multiple rounds of talks, the deadlock between the opposition parties persists. The surprise factor in this election is Prashant Kishore's new party, the Jan Suraj Party. Now, so far, the Jan Suraj Party has announced candidates on 116 seats. The party founder and the poll strategist had previously announced that his party will field candidates on all assembly seats. But Prashant Kishore himself, interestingly, is not going to contest the assembly elections next month. The voting in the Bihar state election will take place in two phases. The first phase is scheduled on the 6th of November and the second is on the 11th of November. And the results will be announced on the 14th. And over 70 million voters will elect their representatives for 243 assembly seats in the state. And nearly about 50% of the voters registered in Bihar are below the age of 35. Now, ahead of the crucial midterm elections in Argentina, President Javier Milei has received the public backing from the American President Donald Trump. Now, Trump's endorsement came during Javier Milei's White House visit, and the two leaders, in fact, held a bilateral meeting just days after Washington announced a $20 billion worth of currency swap with Argentina's central bank. Now, Trump has also referred to Javier Milei and is quoted to be his favorite person. In his post, Donald Trump has said, and I quote, "Great meeting today with Javier Milei. He is doing the right things for his country, and I hope the people of Argentina understand as to how good a job he is doing and will support his work during the upcoming midterms so we can continue to help him achieve Argentina's incredible potential. Now, Javier Milei has my complete and total endorsement, and he will not let you down. Make Argentina great again." Now, the American president, in fact, doubled down on his support for Javier Milei, saying that American backing to Argentina is conditional on the Argentine president staying on in power.
So it's a little bit like that with, if you take a look at Argentina, if the president doesn't win, I know the person that he'd be running against, I believe, we probably have the person. A person is extremely far left and a philosophy that got Argentina into this problem in the first place. So we would not be generous with Argentina if that happened. If he loses, we are not going to be generous with Argentina.
Now, Trump and Javier Milei have been very vocal supporters of each other. The Argentine leader attended Trump's inauguration in January earlier this year, and Trump's support for Javier Milei comes at a time when there is growing dissent against the libertarian leader. And not just people, even the congressional lawmakers are involved in regular tussles with Milei over policies concerning budget cuts for public spending. So his support continues to dwindle. Javier Milei is facing a bit of a litmus test in the legislative elections on the 26th of October. The mandate will determine as to which party controls a majority in the parliament, and this will have a direct impact on the policy decisions amidst a year-long economic crisis in Argentina.
Ayer hemos logrado un apoyo histórico de los Estados Unidos a la República.
And without its wrap on this edition of Race to Power, this is Mohammed Saleh signing off. Thanks for watching.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS centenary year, Kesariya at 100.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Hello there. Welcome to WION Fine Print. We're glad you're watching WION World is One. I'm Eric Njoka. Our top stories. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the United States and its allies will take the steps necessary to impose costs on Russia for its continued aggression if the war in Ukraine does not come to an end. This as he addressed a defense ministers' meeting in Brussels. Pakistan and Afghanistan agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire, this after several killed and many more wounded in violence along their shared border. 2 explosions heard in central Kabul. Gazan Health Ministry says Israel has returned the bodies of 45 Palestinians, bringing the total number handed over